morning and welcome to the Glory TV newspaper review. This morning, I am Titilayo Olamide. And starting with this morning, I have the Punch newspaper, The Sun, Nigerian Tribune, The Nation, Daily Times, and Daily Independent newspaper this morning. And starting with is the Punch newspaper. And on the major news headline, it says, SANS fault presidency attack on grazing ban, next slams Buhari. Land Use Act empowers governors to ban open grazing. It's straightforward. This is coming from Sergey, and is telling us there that the governors of each state have the right to state their opinion upon the open grazing ban. That is, it is not from the federal government to decide that. And then elders' rights of movement doesn't cover rights of cattle destroying farms, says Oyitebo. And South won't yield its land to invaders masquerading as elders. This is coming from Governor Akeredolu of Ondo State. And you can read the stories on page 2 of the Punch newspaper. And then upward, man says petrol price hike is inevitable. Demands transparency from the governors, said from the government. That is on page 27 of the Punch newspaper. Expert fears inflation as CBN further devalues naira to 410 naira per dollars. That is on page 27 also. And then next read is, our next batch of vaccine supply likely to come in August. And that is coming from NPHCDA. That is on page 17. That is the next batch of vaccines will be coming in by August. So we should be expecting that every Nigerians will get vaccinated by then. And then still on the Punch newspaper, said federal government Delta the files on 4.2 million euro Ibori loot payments. Reps member confused, and that story you can read that on page 16 of the Punch newspaper. And the next read is NDLEA plans drug tests for politicians, admission seekers. NDLEA plans drug tests for politicians, admission seekers, and you can read that story on page 16 of the Punch newspaper. And the next read is Oshoba visits Abiodun, recalls others during Daniel and Amosu's tenure. That is on page 30. And then also alleges bribe for salaries in AGF office, massive IPPS fraud. And that story is on page 25 of the Punch newspaper. And then another story coming up on the Punch is mentally ill woman wrongfully accused of baby theft and gun possession lynched in Lagos. You can read that story on page 4 and 5 of the Punch newspaper. And then lastly said MPO backed state police, PIB reduction in governance costs. MPO backed state police, PIB reduction in governance boost. And that story is on page 5 of the Punch newspaper this morning. And that will move to the Daily Sun newspaper. And then on the major news headline says Buhari under fire. Buhari under fire. And it said Akeredolu autumn plaque, others disagree with president on open grazing ban. Don't condemn southern leaders. Macban Southeast Zone. That stories you can read them on page 6 of Daily Sun newspaper. And then on the judicial strike, that's the Juson strike, said Wike threatens to enforce no work, no pay policy. That is because the lawyers are all on strike, and then the governor says he can continue paying them the salary when they are not working. So it decided to bring up this policy of no work and no play policy. And you can read that story on page 8 of the Daily Sun newspaper. And the next read is NNPC Bogan signed agreement to unlock 420 billion naira revenue for Nigeria. NNPC Bonga signed agreement to unlock 420 billion naira revenue for Nigeria. You can read the story on page 2 of the Daily Sun newspaper. And then I have on page 7, it says, Southwest governors building ethnic monsters, Northern elders. Said Southwest governors building ethnic monsters, that is coming from the Northern elders. And they say, attack Southeast, says Nigeria sliding towards disaster. That is the attack on Southeast, says Nigeria is sliding towards disaster. And then on killings, defend yourselves, can all these Plateau residents, that is the Plateau residents are facing attack right now from the elders and the gunmen. So the can is trying to advise them right now that they should defend themselves whenever the need arises. And you can read that story on page 7 of the Daily Sun newspaper. Restructuring will end insecurity, boost economy. Restructuring will end insecurity and boost the economy of Nigeria. That is coming from Peter Obi, and you can read that story on page 7 of the Daily Sun newspaper. And then on the infected NSAS crisis, said 7 months after Lagos still counting losses. That is coming from the Lagos State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu. Said after 7 months of the NSAS protest, that losses are still counting. And then President talks tough. Give IGP marching order to end policemen killing. Deletion of CSO's blacklist police boss over comments on Southeast, South zones. And you can read those stories on page 8 of the Sun newspaper. And then said 6 fighter jets arrive August. 6 fighter jets to arrive August. That is coming from Emefiele. And you can read that on page 2. Lastly, policemen killed as gunmen attack Owerri Enugu police station. Policemen killed as gunmen attack Owerri Enugu police station. Ungwain requests meeting with victims' families, orders immediate reconstruction of buildings. And that is on page 5 of the Daily Sun newspaper this morning. And that we move to the Nigerian Tribune newspaper. Another major news headline is still on the case of Ibori loot. Said 4.2 million euro Ibori loot returned to Delta, Accountant General says. Said $633.8 million, 9.709 million euro recovered so far from Switzerland, island of Chelsea, UK, and Ihad. That story is on page 2. And the next to it is Constitution Amendments. That is on the Constitution Amendments. Said you can't amend forged documents. Oyebode tells NAS. You cannot amend forged documents. That is me saying to say that the Nigerian constitutions were forged into a particular document and you cannot be amended since they are forged. And that is coming from Oyebode, and he is addressing the National Assembly. And that story is on page 6 of the Nigerian Tribune newspaper. Now, next to it is page 28. Said media owners, editors, NUJ offer 5-point actions to tackle nation's challenges. As media owners are bringing out 5 points actions to tackle the nation's challenges. And the next to it is on page 7. Said NNPC Bonga signed agreement to unlock 2 billion barrels of oil in OML 118. NNPC Bonga signed agreement to unlock 2 billion barrels of oil in OML 118. And that story is on page 7 of the Nigerian Tribune newspaper this morning. And then CBN to states said, be good debtors, repay your debts. Be good debtors, repay your debts. Retain monetary policy rates. That story is on page 6 of the Nigerian Tribune newspaper. And a man kills roommate, sells body parts to pastor for rituals in Bayelsa. A man killed his roommate in Bayelsa State and then sold the body parts to a particular pastor for money ritual. And that story can be found on page 27 of the Nigerian Tribune newspaper this morning. Next week is no land on South will be ceded to invaders masquerading as herdsmen. That is coming from the governor of Ondo State, that is Rotimi Akeredolu. Said, can't Benue out of your planned grazing revenues. Autumn tells presidency. Can't Benue out of your planned grazing reserves. Autumn tells presidency. Buhari government not organized. That is coming from Afenifere. Buhari government not organized. Evacuate all elders from South. CNG tells federal government evacuate all elders from South. CNG tells federal government. And you can read all the stories on page 5 of the Nigerian Tribune newspaper. Up on the still on Nigerian Tribune, said attack on northerners in South must stop. Attack on northerners in South must stop. That is NEF. That is the Northerners Forum, Elders Forum. Lastly, government bomb police station in Enugu, kill 4 officers, 5 arrested in Imo as police fall attempt to burn station. And that is on page 27. Government burn police station in Enugu, kill 4 officers, 5 arrested in Imo as police fall attempt to burn police station. And you can find all the stories on the Nigerian Tribune newspaper this morning. And with that, we move to The Nation. And on the major news headline, said presidency gets knocked for opposing open grazing ban. Presidency gets knocked for opposing open grazing ban. Akeredolu stands shocking, provocative. Autumn Okowa Clark fought federal government. And you can read the stories on page 4 of the Nation newspaper this morning. And then next week is banks insist states must repay their loans. Bank insists states must repay their loans. It says MPC retains interest rate at 11.5%. Banks are resolved to recall all loans to state governments. They got an ally in Central Bank of Nigeria Governor Godwin Emefiele, who insists that states must pay back all the loans extended to them by deposit money banks and the Apex Bank. So the CBN governor is telling all state governments that they should pay all the loans they were being loaned by them. And this story is on page 4 of the Nation newspaper. Now, NNPC Bogan plans to raise $700 million cash. NNPC Bogan plans to raise $700 million US. That story also is on page 4 of the Nation newspaper this morning. And the UK worried about Southeast insecurity. UK worried about Southeast insecurity. That story is on page 25 of the Nation newspaper. Delta gets 4.2 million euro Ibori linked loot. You can read that story on page 25 also about the Ibori loot. And then on petrol subsidy, Labour puts union on strike alert. Labour puts unions on strike alert. You can find that on page 25 of the Nation newspaper. And the next week is CBN devalues Naira to 410 Naira 25 kobo. 410 Naira 25 kobo per dollars. CBN devalues Naira to 410 Naira 25 kobo per dollars. NAFES rates adopted. NAFES rates adopted. You can read that story on page 7 of the Nation newspaper. All must preserve Nigeria's unity, says Tinubu. All must preserve Nigeria's unity, says Tinubu, and that story is on page 4. 4 policemen killed in attack on Enugu police station. 4 policemen killed in attack on Enugu police station. And all the stories can be found on page 4 of the Nation newspaper this morning. And that we move to this day. Another major news headline said Buhari not in support of open grazing. Presidency clarifies Buhari not in support of the open grazing ban. He said he is not in support of it. And then he opened up, he clarifies why he is not in support of it. Southern governors insist no land for invaders. The Southern governors insist that there is no land for invaders. And then ACF maintains position on cattle restriction. ACF maintains their position on the cattle restriction. Buhari's opposition to Southern governors ill-advised, says Clark. Buhari's opposition to Southern governor ill-advised, says Clark. And then lastly, SANS alleged ethnic bias. SANS alleged ethnic bias. And that other stories is on this day newspaper. You can go to page 8. You can find the stories on page 8. And then Elumelu urges leaders to prioritize youth empowerment, job creation. Elumelu urges leaders to prioritize youth empowerment and job creation. And that story is on page 5. And then Air Force rises committee to audit aircraft safety. Air Force rises committee to audit aircraft safety. Panel gets June 18 deadline to submit report. Panel gets June 18 deadline to submit report. And you can read that story on page 10. Delta yet to receive 4.2 million euro recovered loot, says official. Delta yet to receive 4.2 million euro recovered loot, says officials. And that story is on page 5 of the state newspaper. And the lastly said, drop your arms, embrace anchor borrowers program. Emefiele tells bandits. Drop your arms, embrace anchor borrowers program. Emefiele tells bandits. CBN rises COVID-19 targets credit facility to 400 billion naira. Mer's introduction of digital currencies. And that story is on page 10 of the state newspaper. NNPC shell other seal deal to unlock $10 billion investment. NNPC shells other seal deal to unlock $10 billion investment. And that story is on page 6 of this day newspaper this morning. And that takes us to the Daily Times. Another major news outlet said reps querying handling of $23 million, 2.725 billion naira by AGF NNPC. Reps query handling of $23 million, 2.725 billion naira by AGF NNPC. That story is on page 2 of the Daily Times newspaper this morning. CBN retains economic parameters amid naira devaluation to 410 naira per dollars. CBN retained economic parameters amid naira devaluation to 410 naira per dollars. And that story is on page 5 of the Daily Times newspaper this morning. And the business part, NNPC and SNEPC others sign multi-billion dollars deep water agreement. NNPC, SNEPC others sign multi-billion dollar deep water agreement. And the story is on page 2 of the Daily Times newspaper. Then on oil spillage, compel Shell to clean up Niger Delta oil spills now. CSO tells federal government. Compel Shell to clean up Niger Delta oil spills now. CSO tells federal government. And that story is on page 25 of the Daily Times newspaper. And then we have an anniversary. On second anniversary, Sanwo-Olu gets kudos for unveiling of iconic projects. On second anniversary, Sanwo-Olu gets kudos for unveiling of iconic projects as Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu marks 2 years in office on Monday 29 this year. On May 29 this year, analysts and observers have been assessing how far he has gone in his journey to lift Lagos to a greater height. And that story is on page 3 of the Daily Times newspaper this morning. And with this, we've come to the end of the newspaper review this morning. Don't forget to join us by 12 p.m. for more news updates. I am Titilayo Olamide. Thanks for watching and do have a lovely day.